I did a video recently on how Honeycrisp apples taste really good, but the tree they grow from has no will to live, and so they're very difficult to grow, and that's why Honeycrisp apples are more expensive. So naturally, people had questions: if I want an apple that's like Honeycrisp, but maybe a little bit more affordable and less sad about being alive, what can I try instead? So I have a list of apples that are Honeycrisp-like. Most of them are descended from Honeycrisp itself, and we're going to read the list, and then we're going to talk about how and why these apples came to be. But first, we have to get the list. So if you're in a grocery store in North America or a place that imports apples from North America, the most common, in my experience anyway, are Sweet Tango and Cosmic Crisp. But we've also got Sugar Bee, Wild Twist, Lucy Glow, Lucy Rose, Karma, Honeys, spelled Hunnyz. A lot of these are spelled weird so that we know they're fun. Rosalie, Evercrisp, Juicy with an I, Pizzazz, Aura, and Rave. If you are up in apple orchard country, go ahead and eat the local apples. And I'm not going to tell you which ones are best there because I don't know. Ask the orchard, dealer's choice. They're going to know what their local situation is and fill you in. That's not information you get from a YouTuber talking to everybody on the internet. That's local information. Use it. Also, if there's other apples that you like and prefer, like Braeburns, Galas, Granny Smith, Pink Ladies, then eat them. It's your face. You get to decide what goes in it. So we need to talk about why there are so many apples that are kind of in the Honeycrisp niche now. When Honeycrisp came out on the market in had to been late 90s, early 2000s, I think, people were very excited about it because it's really sweet and it's also got that crunch. It's got cell walls that are just really crispy. They have a lot of pectin in them. And so it's got that really cool crunchy texture. Apples can get kind of soft and mealy, and that's not as fun. If you have a good crisp apple, not only does it store well, like it just handles transportation better than other apples, but it's going to have a nice satisfying crunch that people like to eat. And I think making fruits and vegetables that people like to eat is a good idea that we should do more of. There was just one problem. With Honeycrisp, the trees hate being alive. They're very bad at moving calcium and other nutrients to the fruit, and so the fruit wind up deformed a lot and have to be turned into juice, and they're just very difficult to raise. So once Honeycrisp came out and was wildly popular, everybody in the fruit breeding world said, hey, we got an opportunity. We can make something that has good fruit like Honeycrisp, but the tree doesn't suck. We should all try that. And so all these fruit breeding programs from universities and I think also private companies got in on this. And they started breeding apples like crazy. A lot of them started with Honeycrisp as one of the parents, and then they crossed it with a bunch of other apples to see if you could get that Honeycrisp fruit quality, the taste and texture, with a tree that wanted to be alive more than Honeycrisp does. And it took time because apple trees, you make a seed, you plant the seed, it takes a few years to grow into an adult, and then you have to usually try a few different times. You have to try a few different years before you get trees that are both healthy and also make a fruit that is Honeycrisp good. You just have to try a lot of times to get an apple. You're going to have to plant probably a few million seeds to come up with a tree that is healthy and can produce fruit that is as good as Honeycrisp. You're just really playing a very stacked game of roulette against nature there, so you have to spin the wheel a lot of times. So all these companies and universities put a lot of effort into this. They took a lot of land and planted it with apples. They hired a lot of people to take care of those apples, to test those apples. Good apples don't just happen by accident. It takes a lot of time and human care and attention, which means you have to pay for that somehow, which is why a lot of these Honeycrisp type apples are being grown with licenses and patents to make sure that the people who put in all that work have a chance to get paid. That is a very big and important conversation, and I think something that does get left out a lot of the time is breeding plants is a lot of work. It does have to be paid for somehow. I don't think it's good to have all the IP owned by a very small number of people. But breeding good plants is, in fact, a lot of work, and work should be paid. But the bottom line, you've got things like Cosmic Crisp can only be grown in the state of Washington until 2026 or 2027, I think. That's part of that license requirement, because the University of Washington bred that apple with the goal of helping the farmers in Washington make more money. So that's part of the deal, is that apple is restricted to Washington for a while. Other states and companies will have different deals and arrangements, but that's part of it. The good news is, after 2026 or 2027, once these license periods are done, then planting those apples is open to everybody, and those trees are still a lot healthier than Honeycrisp. So over time, that investment in breeding better apples really does pay off. It's kind of funny because the life of an orchard is measured in decades, and so having to wait a couple of years before you can plant a tree is not necessarily that big a deal in the grand scheme of things. It just gives the people and the taxpayers who funded the development of that fruit some time to recoup something from it, which is really important if we're going to keep breeding new varieties to keep up with changing climate, changing markets, and things like that. Those efforts really do have to have a way to pay for themselves, or it's really tough to keep doing it, and we just stop getting new varieties of fruit and vegetables that are tasty, that people want to eat, and that can handle our current conditions. I'll give you just one example of why it's important to make those things work financially. There's a relative of pistachio that grows really well in North Carolina. It can handle the humidity, it can handle the cooler temperatures. It's called Chinese pistachio, and it's an ornamental tree that's grown a lot in North Carolina just because, it looks nice on the street. It is closely related to the pistachio that we eat and has the same number of chromosomes. So as a former and recovering plant breeder, I think it is possible to breed a pistachio tree that can handle more humid weather, be grown in the eastern part of the country, be grown in places where water is less scarce. And I think that might be really nice. But the breeding process for that would take a long time. If it takes 20 or 30 years to do that, that means you have to pay people to breed and take care of these trees for 20 or 30 years before anything comes out of it. That means you need to have land set aside to have these trees growing. And 99.99% of them are going to turn out to be terrible. You can't use them. And so it's a lot of effort and dedication that it takes to go into these things before you get cool new crop varieties that are really important. That's why now there's about a dozen varieties of Honeycrisp-ish apples that are out there in the stores, because people recognized it was a really good apple, but it had some serious problems. And so a lot of people decided to get in there and fix it. And now we have lots of very cool apples as a result. A lot of those Honeycrisp alternatives are still kind of expensive right now because the supply is a little bit low. But as more people start planting them, the price for them is going to go down as supply goes up. Which is not true for Honeycrisp, because Honeycrisp apples are expensive because the trees are just depressed. So that's too much information about fruit. Please enjoy.